There is no good time to talk about Mr. Epstein.
3 minutes ago, the royal family released a heartbreaking statement about Prince Andrew, and the world froze trying to understand what had just been confirmed. Behind the palace walls, emotions are running dangerously high, and the reality unfolding is far more tragic and unsettling than anyone expected. What really happened? Why did the royal family choose this exact moment to finally break their silence? And what does this mean for the future of the monarchy itself? Stay right here as we dig into the untold story, the quiet conversations no one was meant to hear, and the emotional shockwaves now rattling Buckingham Palace from the inside out. You'll want to see this through to the very end. It changes everything. The shocking announcement dropped just 3 minutes ago, when the calm of a typical royal afternoon was suddenly ripped apart. The official social media channels of the royal family released a short but devastating statement concerning Prince Andrew. Within seconds, phones vibrated non-stop. News alerts flashed worldwide, and television anchors rushed on air trying to decode the meaning behind every word. The tone was somber, trembling with tightly controlled emotion. The statement was brief, yet every word carried enormous weight, echoing through every corridor of Buckingham Palace. It felt like a curtain slamming shut on a chapter already surrounded by shadows. Outside the palace gates, a small crowd quietly gathered, sensing history was unfolding. Their faces showed a mix of curiosity, disbelief, and unease. Reporters hurried to set up cameras, their voices blending into a low, restless hum of speculation. The royal family spokesperson took no questions, offering only a carefully written statement that opened with 3 chilling words: "With great sorrow." Those words alone sparked a storm of emotion and fear inside the palace walls. The mood inside was reportedly heavy and suffocating. Staff members who had served the royal household for decades stood frozen in stunned silence. Whispers spread about meetings held behind locked doors and urgent calls made to senior royals hours before the announcement. It was clear this decision was deliberate, serious, and not taken lightly. Every phrase had been weighed for impact. The royal press office had been preparing for this moment for days, possibly even weeks, knowing the public reaction would be immediate and explosive. The media didn't hesitate. Within minutes, major networks in London, New York, and Sydney interrupted programming with special reports. Every outlet ran the same headline: heartbreaking news about Prince Andrew. Commentators dissected the language, analysing every pause, every word choice, and every omission. This wasn't a routine update or a passing note. It marked a major turning point in the public life of a man once praised for duty and loyalty. The world wanted clarity, but clarity didn't come. Social media platforms flooded instantly with reactions from across the globe. Some expressed sorrow and sympathy, others disbelief, and many outright anger. The announcement struck a nerve far beyond the monarchy itself. The story stopped being about one individual and became a reflection of an institution facing one of its most difficult moments yet. As evening approached, the palace gates remained firmly closed. Lights flickered behind tall windows where generations of monarchs once stood waving to cheering crowds. There were no appearances tonight, no reassuring smiles, no comforting gestures, only silence, thick with consequence and the weight of what had been revealed. Whatever the full nature of the news, it was clear this was more than a simple declaration. It carried the gravity of loss, consequence, and finality, signalling that something profound had shifted within the royal household. A new chapter was unfolding, one that would test the strength, unity, and resilience of the monarchy in the days ahead. The man behind the title matters. Before the world can fully grasp the heartbreak of this announcement, it must remember the man at the centre of it all. Prince Andrew, the Duke of York, was born in 1960, the third child and second son of Queen Elizabeth II and Prince Philip. For many years, he was seen as one of the most energetic and promising members of the royal family. From an early age, he carried confidence and charm that defined his generation of royals. Behind the polished smile and formal duties, people wondered who the man beneath the title really was. In his youth, Prince Andrew was known as the adventurous one, the prince who chased excitement and challenge. He joined the Royal Navy and quickly earned respect for discipline and bravery. Serving as a helicopter pilot during the Falklands War, he flew dangerous missions over the South Atlantic. The nation admired him. Crowds cheered his courage. Newspapers once proudly called him the fearless prince. How did that same figure become linked with sorrow years later? Throughout the 1980s and 1990s, he carried out royal duties with confidence. He travelled worldwide on behalf of the Queen, representing the crown at ceremonies and official events. Often smiling and shaking hands, he appeared comfortable in his role. His marriage to Sarah Ferguson, known to many as Fergie, captured public attention instantly. Their 1986 wedding felt like a fairy tale moment watched by millions. For a time, the Duke and Duchess of York symbolised modern royal romance, but as years passed, cracks appeared. The marriage ended in the early 1990s, followed by relentless media scrutiny and unkind headlines that refused to fade. The tone around his name shifted fast. The once admired prince now found himself linked to controversy and poor judgment. Public appearances became rare. Confidence weakened. The palace that once protected him now reflected every flaw back to the world. Those closest to him often described him as loyal, yet stubborn, proud, yet vulnerable. Above all, he remained devoted to his daughters, Princess Beatrice and Princess Eugenie. To them, he wasn't a symbol or a scandal. He was simply Papa, for a man surrounded by titles that may have been the only one that truly mattered, even as the shadow of past choices lingered. Every new headline, every whispered rumour seemed to push him further from public grace. The monarchy, once his shield, became a mirror exposing every misstep. As this latest announcement spread worldwide, many wondered if this story had reached its most painful chapter yet. Was this the end of his royal journey, or simply the cost of a lifetime lived under the weight of a crown? In the tense moments before the statement, the atmosphere inside Buckingham Palace was thick with unease, and in the hours leading up to the announcement, every corridor seemed quieter than usual, every footstep softer, as though those within the palace walls understood that something historic was about to unfold. Staff members moved with quiet urgency, carrying sealed envelopes, answering hushed phone calls, and trading brief, knowing glances. The palace, long seen as a symbol of order and power, had shifted into a place thick with tension. Every move, every sentence, every pause was being carefully calculated, as if one wrong step could send shockwaves far beyond those walls. It all began early that morning when the senior communications team gathered in a private conference room deep inside the palace. The atmosphere was tight and serious. No small talk, no wasted time. Everyone in that room understood the stakes, and no one needed reminding of what was on the line. The statement had been drafted, rewritten, and reviewed again and again. Legal advisors, press officers, and senior aides stood shoulder to shoulder, reading and rereading each line. The responsibility felt crushing. Once the message went out, there would be no undo button. The words had to land perfectly, not just to be accurate, but to protect what little dignity could still be held together. Throughout the morning, senior members of the royal family were consulted. Private calls were placed to Balmoral, Windsor, and Clarence House. The voices on the other end were calm, but weighed down by reality. The Queen, known for her steady composure even during crisis, was reportedly quiet and reflective. Every phrase passed before her eyes before final approval. There was no emotion in her voice when the decision was made. It was the judgment of a monarch, not a mother. Yet those present said the silence that followed felt deafening. Courtiers whispered about timing, debating whether the statement should be delayed until evening when attention might soften, or released immediately to stop rumours from spiralling out of control. The communications team knew hesitation could make things worse. The call was made. The announcement would go out in the early afternoon, when the world was fully awake and watching closely. As the final minutes ticked down, tension peaked. The statement was uploaded to the royal website. Official Twitter and Instagram posts were loaded and ready. One press officer was assigned the task of pressing the button. Behind that simple click sat hours of planning and years of consequences. When the moment came, the press officer paused, took a steady breath, and clicked publish. In an instant, the palace's silence was shattered. Outside, news agencies received alerts and rushed the story across the globe. Television screens from London to Los Angeles flashed breaking news banners within minutes. The same somber headline appeared everywhere, paired with images of the palace gates standing firm and closed. Reporters stood beneath grey skies, voices steady but eyes revealing the weight of the moment. Inside the communications room, staff watched the coverage unfold in real time. Some stared at the screens, others looked down at their notes. Rain began tapping softly against tall palace windows, adding to the heavy mood. No one spoke. Everyone knew the story had left their hands. The world would now interpret it, question it, and judge it freely. That evening, as palace lights dimmed and staff quietly left their offices, a thick stillness lingered. The iron gates remained closed, and the Union Jack fluttered weakly in the damp wind. The decision had been made, the words had been spoken, and history shifted once more. The statement wasn't just an announcement. It marked the end of something long unfolding, a painful acknowledgement of truths that could no longer stay hidden. As the world absorbed the shock, Buckingham Palace stood as a silent witness to its own unravelling. The grandeur remained, but sorrow settled deep within its walls. Behind every curtain and inside every chamber, the weight of the moment lingered. The echoes of that afternoon were not fading anytime soon. The royal institution, so used to control, was reminded again that no secret stays buried forever. By the time the statement went public, the clock read precisely 12:57 in the afternoon. It appeared first on the royal family's official website, followed seconds later by verified social media posts. The timing was deliberate. After hours of debate among palace officials and communications advisors, the digital world reacted instantly. Phones buzzed non-stop. News alerts lit up screens across continents. Within moments, words once guarded so carefully were now visible to millions. The statement was brief, but heavy with emotion. It opened with 3 solemn words, "with great sorrow," setting the tone immediately. The phrasing was formal, but the sadness cut through clearly. Each sentence was measured, designed to show gravity without drama. It did not beg for sympathy or offer defense. Instead, it reflected the controlled dignity the royal family had long relied on through generations of crisis and triumph. Still, beneath the polished language, the pain was impossible to miss. News anchors broke into regular programming to read the statement aloud. Their voices carried shock and solemn respect. Studios quickly filled with experts dissecting every phrase and implication. Historians and legal analysts searched for meaning between the lines. Certain phrases stood out, hinting at unity in grief but division in circumstance. The BBC paused normal broadcasting for continuous coverage, and international networks followed fast. Outside Buckingham Palace, crowds grew. Some brought flowers, others stood quietly, trying to process what had happened. The air felt heavy with sadness and unanswered questions. Passing cars slowed, drivers glancing toward the gates as news crews captured raw reactions. Inside the palace, staff monitored global media feeds as the story spread worldwide. Calls poured in from newsrooms asking for clarification, but no further statements were issued. The royal family had said what they intended to say. Anything more would only feed speculation. Silence was the strategy. By evening, every major newspaper had published online editions featuring the same image: Buckingham Palace under grey skies. The headlines differed, but the message was the same. Something fundamental had shifted. The sense of finality was impossible to ignore. Long after sunset, cameras lingered on the palace exterior. The Union Jack was faintly illuminated by security lights, barely moving in the night air. As the city quieted, the palace grounds remained still, carrying the weight of the day. The world had heard the official words, yet the deeper story remained locked behind ancient walls. The statement had been released. The silence had been broken. A new chapter in royal history had begun. For the royal family, this was not just another public announcement. It was the formal acknowledgement of a reality they could no longer hide, a moment that would forever shape the legacy of Prince Andrew and the institution he once represented. The emotional fallout in the hours that followed carried a heavy, unspoken grief that settled over both the royal family and the nation alike. Inside Buckingham Palace, the gold-framed portraits and polished marble floors could not mask the sorrow that had descended. Courtiers spoke in hushed tones, steps careful and restrained. There was no laughter, no comfort of routine, only the stillness that arrives after a storm has finally broken. The Queen was said to have spent much of the afternoon inside her private study, far from cameras, advisors, and public view. Those closest to her described her presence as steady on the surface, yet deeply pained beneath it all. A lifetime of royal duty had prepared her for wars, losses, and global crises, but seeing her son's name once again dominate headlines around the world brought a sadness no protocol could soften. Her reign had weathered conflict, grief, and national upheaval, yet wounds born inside her own family always cut the deepest. In another wing of the palace, Prince Andrew remained secluded and out of sight. He had been informed moments before the statement went public, but even that brief warning could not dull the blow of seeing his name once again linked to heartbreak and controversy. For years, he had retreated from public life, appearing only at select private family moments. But now, the tone inside the palace left no room for denial. The sense of finality was unmistakable. Doors that once opened without question were now firmly closed, and the silence surrounding him felt heavier than any crowd. Later that evening, Princess Beatrice and Princess Eugenie were both seen leaving their respective homes. They avoided the press as best they could, but cameras still found them, capturing the exhaustion etched across their faces. They had long defended their father privately, even as public opinion hardened. Now they were forced to face the painful truth that this moment could not be undone. The statement had not only altered their father's standing, it reshaped the very structure of their family. What once felt permanent now felt fragile. In the streets of London, crowds continued to gather near the palace gates. Some arrived out of respect, others driven by disbelief, all sensing that something historic was ending before their eyes. Flowers began to line the iron railings, simple tributes carrying handwritten messages of sympathy and sorrow. Strangers stood shoulder to shoulder in silence, united by a shared feeling that a long chapter of royal life was quietly closing. The air was cool, the sky heavy with clouds, and camera shutters echoed faintly through the crowd. Across television screens, commentators spoke in lowered, serious tones. Royal experts, historians, and political analysts filled the airwaves, offering interpretations of what this moment meant for the monarchy's image. Newspapers released lengthy editorials reflecting on Prince Andrew's rise, his fall, and the lasting consequences of both. By nightfall, the story had moved beyond scandal and entered the realm of tragedy. Buckingham Palace appeared almost lifeless. The courtyard stood empty. Most windows were dark, save for a few faint glows high above. The royal standard remained lowered, fluttering gently in the night breeze as the world watched and waited. No sign came. No reassurance followed. The royal family, once a symbol of composure and endurance, now faced a silence too heavy to fill. The emotional fallout of that day left a mark that would not fade quickly. This was not merely the end of a public chapter, but the quiet unravelling of something deeply private and sacred. For the Queen, for her family, and for a nation that had watched them for generations, the sorrow that began with those 3 words, "with great sorrow," continued to spread slowly and relentlessly through every corner of the kingdom. Behind the elegance of royal statements and the calm surface of official protocol, deeper motives were quietly shaping the decisions surrounding Prince Andrew's fate. The announcement that stunned the public had not appeared overnight. It was the result of weeks, perhaps months, of intense deliberation among the highest ranks of the monarchy. Every word had been weighed, every possible reaction anticipated, every risk carefully measured. This was never just about one man. It was about protecting an institution that had endured for centuries. Inside the palace, those closest to the Queen understood that timing was everything. The monarchy was still adjusting to a new era. After the passing of Prince Philip and the ascension of King Charles III, public confidence remained fragile. Each decision carried enormous scrutiny. Releasing a statement about Prince Andrew at this moment was not accidental. It was a calculated move meant to stabilize the crown before quiet whispers turned into uncontrollable storms. Advisors had long been divided on how to handle the Duke of York's public position. Some argued that continued silence appeared cold and unforgiving. Others warned that any attempt at restoration would damage the monarchy's credibility. The debate reached a breaking point when new developments, undisclosed but significant, reached senior aides. At that moment, silence was no longer an option. The royal family would step forward, not to condemn, but to close a chapter. The stakes were enormous. Every controversy sends ripples far beyond palace walls. Charitable organisations linked to the Duke had already begun distancing themselves quietly, unwilling to be drawn into turmoil. Diplomatic circles abroad grew cautious. Some nations reportedly reconsidered future royal engagements, and even the Commonwealth watched closely. The statement needed to balance dignity with accountability. Public relations teams worked endlessly, consulting legal experts and communication strategists through draft after draft. The statement could not say too much, yet it had to satisfy a public demanding clarity. Too soft, and it would appear evasive. Too firm, and it would sound like abandonment. In the end, they chose formality edged with sorrow. A tone acknowledging gravity while maintaining family unity. Privately, the emotional toll was severe. Those closest to the Duke feared the long-term impact, not just on him, but on his daughters and on the memory of the late Queen, whose compassion had long softened public judgment. Loyalty inside the palace was being tested quietly and painfully. Some staff members who had served him for decades began resigning discreetly. Their departures were framed as routine changes. The Duke's inner circle grew smaller. His influence faded into silence. From the outside, observers saw the announcement as strategic necessity. The monarchy's strength has always depended on adaptation. At times, it has meant sacrifice, distancing itself from controversy to preserve the whole. The message was clear. No one, regardless of title, stands above the institution. Legacy outweighs individual redemption. As days passed, the impact of the decision became clearer. Public trust, once shaken, began to steady as the palace maintained its silence. Initial outrage softened into reflection. The monarchy had chosen its path, and though the cost was deeply personal, the message was unmistakable. The crown would endure, even if hearts within the family quietly broke. Behind closed doors, while the world reacted to official words, the real storm brewed privately behind the tall white walls of Buckingham Palace, where every curtain was drawn and every word guarded. The atmosphere was one of exhaustion and unresolved conflict. Meetings stretched late into the night. Voices hushed. Tension thick. What had once been whispered speculation was now openly discussed among a shrinking circle of trusted advisers. In a smaller drawing room, senior aides gathered around polished tables scattered with newspapers from across the globe. Headlines stared back at them, each one questioning what the announcement meant for the monarchy's future. They knew this was no longer just crisis management. This had become a matter of survival for the institution itself. Reports filtered in from Balmoral, Windsor and Sandringham, all carrying the same note of concern. Every branch of the family had been briefed, every member warned to avoid comment. The palace's internal communication system was locked down completely. All inquiries were routed through the central press office. Control was absolute. Silence was deliberate, yet beneath that silence, emotions ran deep. Those close to the Duke described a man withdrawn and weighed down by consequence. He remained largely out of sight, avoiding cameras and visitors alike. Letters from the public arrived daily, some offering sympathy, others sharp criticism. Staff collected them quietly, uncertain which should be opened and which left untouched. In his private quarters, the Duke reportedly spent long hours alone. He walked the halls in silence, occasionally stopping before family portraits that once symbolized pride, belonging, and permanence. Inside the palace, subtle divisions began to surface. Some senior aides believed the monarchy had gone too far, that compassion should have outweighed image. Others argued that the decision was necessary to protect the future of the crown, particularly under King Charles's leadership. Voices rose during private discussions, only to fall back into the familiar decorum of royal order. But the fractures were visible now, like hairline cracks running beneath centuries of polished tradition. Even the household staff could sense the change. The once lively rhythm of palace life had slowed. Footsteps echoed more sharply through marble corridors. Meals were taken in silence, and the usual laughter that filled the staff dining hall was gone. Everyone knew that something irreversible had occurred. The atmosphere carried the strange weight of mourning, though no one had died. As night fell, the lights of Buckingham Palace glowed faintly through the mist. From the outside, it appeared serene, timeless, untouched. But behind those walls, hearts were weary, and the corridors whispered of loss. The world would see the crown as calm and steady, yet within it trembled under the weight of its own secrets. The decisions made in those hidden rooms would ripple far beyond that night, shaping not just the legacy of one prince, but the destiny of the entire royal family. Every gesture, every cautious word would now carry meaning far beyond the palace gates, reaching journalists, diplomats, and citizens alike in ways both subtle and undeniable. The broader impact. The days following the announcement marked a quiet turning point for the British monarchy. The world had absorbed the shock, but the consequences continued to unfold like slow-moving waves, reaching every corner of public life. The royal family had spoken, but the echo of their words carried far beyond palaces and press rooms into a world now questioning the meaning of loyalty, legacy, and leadership. Charities and organisations, once proudly associated with Prince Andrew, began to reassess their affiliations. Several quietly removed his name from honorary titles and public listings, choosing diplomacy over declaration. For those who depended on royal patronage, the moment was delicate. How to show respect to the crown while distancing from its controversy. Every small decision now reflected the pressure building on the monarchy from every angle. The shift was subtle but symbolic, reflecting a collective understanding that the monarchy's image itself was at stake on the international stage. Diplomats and state leaders watched closely. The British monarchy, long regarded as a pillar of stability and grace, now stood under renewed scrutiny, particularly in some Commonwealth nations. Commentators questioned whether the institution could continue to embody the moral authority it once commanded. Yet within the United Kingdom, an opposite sentiment began to rise, an almost protective instinct toward the monarchy as it faced one of its hardest tests in recent memory. For the media, the story became more than a headline. It became a mirror, reflecting society's complex relationship with its royal figures. Some saw the palace's move as accountability, a sign that no title placed anyone above consequence. Others viewed it as a painful reminder of how power, privilege, and pressure intertwine within the royal circle. Television programs dedicated entire specials to the fallout. Columnists debated whether this moment represented an ending or a necessary renewal. Inside Buckingham Palace, operations continued with quiet determination. Staff carried on their duties, restoring rhythm to daily routines, yet the shift in atmosphere was undeniable. The royal household had become more cautious, more guarded, aware that every word and gesture would now be scrutinized. By the end of that week, one truth stood clear. This was not just a story about Prince Andrew. It was a defining moment in the monarchy's modern journey, a test of endurance, humility, and adaptation. The royal family had crossed another threshold in history, and though the scars were invisible, they would remain for years to come. Even as ceremonies continued, the memory of this turning point would quietly influence how the monarchy operated in private for generations. What comes next? In the days that followed, the royal family entered a period of quiet reflection. The announcement had achieved its purpose, but it left behind emotional exhaustion and uncertainty beneath the grandeur of Buckingham Palace. Life moved at a slower pace, meetings continued, duties resumed, but the tone had changed. The sense of invincibility that once surrounded the monarchy now felt tempered by fragility. Prince Andrew remained out of the public eye. His retreat was total, his silence unbroken. Those closest to him described a man resigned to his circumstances, aware that any attempt at restoration would only reignite controversy. His world had grown smaller, limited to private residences, family visits, and carefully managed moments. For a prince who once represented courage, charm, and royal confidence, the transformation was profound. The man who had once flown helicopters in wartime now faced a quieter battle, one of solitude and remembrance. Within the royal family, attention shifted toward healing. King Charles understood that unity would be the only path forward. Family gatherings became more private, more deliberate, often without cameras or announcements. There was a sense of protection around the younger generation, especially the grandchildren, whose futures the king now sought to safeguard from the weight of old mistakes. The monarchy's survival depended not on perfection, but on its ability to learn, adapt, and endure. Public opinion, though divided, began to soften. Many Britons saw the episode as a painful but necessary reckoning. The monarchy had shown restraint, humility, and a willingness to confront uncomfortable truths in a world quick to judge and slow to forgive. That quiet accountability carried unexpected power, and its ripple would be felt in charitable, diplomatic, and social arenas for months to come. As days turned into weeks, Buckingham Palace slowly regained its rhythm. The gardens were tended once more. The changing of the guard resumed with ceremony. Visitors gathered again at the gates. Yet beneath the pageantry, the memory of those tense days remained. The story of Prince Andrew entered history not as a tale of privilege and power, but as a lesson in consequence. For the royal family, it marked an ending and the fragile beginning of renewal. The monarchy, though shaken, stood unbroken, continuing its centuries-long duty to endure, adapt, and carry on beneath the unyielding weight of the crown. Behind the royal titles and grand traditions lies a family bound by love, burdened by duty, and shaped by human frailty. The past cannot be undone, but from every fall comes the chance for renewal. As the palace lights dim and the cameras fade, the echoes of this chapter linger, reminding the world that even those born to crowns are not immune to the storms of life. If you found this story compelling, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, share it with others who follow royal history, and leave a comment below with your thoughts. Your support helps us bring you more in-depth royal stories like this one. See you next time. Stay tuned for more updates, behind-the-scenes insights, and untold stories from Buckingham Palace that the world won't see anywhere else.